Hey there, welcome to Spectrum Pulse, where we talk about music, movies, art, and culture. And today we've got another quasi-unscripted review of my recent visit to Pitchfork Music Festival in Chicago for 2024. Like with last year when I did a recap for Osheaga, I'm hoping that this is going to be somewhat of a broad overview of the festival, my thoughts on the various acts that I was able to see, and some general musings about the environment. Although in this case, given that I saw fewer acts that I disliked, more just overall praise, hopefully it'll be a little bit shorter. Again, no promises. I did get some footage. As usual, I will say the footage is not stellar. I didn't have all of my equipment with me. But in this case, I was relatively pleased with what I saw. Just take all footage with a grain of salt there. So without further ado, just talk briefly about getting into the festival. I flew in on Thursday. Thankfully, I managed to dodge all the cloud strike nonsense that crippled airports across the nation. Like always, I paid a bit more for the opportunity to have the plus area. I specifically go for that, so I have the ability to get in and out of the festival at my own pace whenever I want to. I just generally want to have that added degree of flexibility, and as we'll see when it comes to the Friday, that will be very relevant. But outside of that, again, it wasn't altogether surprising. The beer selection was generally pretty good. The food selection was pretty good. I will say, in comparison to 2022, where I also went to Pitchfork, I'd say that it was a little bit more crowded, but that's not altogether surprising, especially coming 2022 with the proximity to the worst years of the pandemic lockdown. This having a little bit more distance, it's not surprised that it got, well, a little bit busier. So with all of that out of the way, let's go from the first acts that I saw on Friday.
That's really what you see. Shut your mouth, bitch, don't twerk. Lock this power in my feet. I be drowning on my shit. I be prowling on my shit. You the brave. Fuck what you say. Winner niggas on the block. Winner niggas on my cock. I ain't fucking with the lots. Come on, really with the shit. But you fucking with the ops. I ain't rapping for the props. Fuck a fan, fuck a cop. I'm the man and you not. Angry niggas about to pop. Why you sleeping on me? Stop. Angry. 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 Angry.
Alright, let's start off with Angry Blackmen. I gotta be honest, I feel a little bit bad about talking about this one because Angry Blackmen is a rap duo that's been on my radar for a little bit since I actually heard about their album earlier this year. That's been perpetually in my backlog of, I should maybe cover them when I get a chance, and I've just been overwhelmed. I haven't had a chance to really get to them. Kind of a shame because they put forward one hell of a first impression properly here. The vibe I get is kind of a little bit of Death Grips, but more focused on the bruising, call and response, get all the party going. I'd say there's a little bit more lyrical refinement required, a little bit more performance requirement, but what they're making up there, they're making up with a ton of energy, and the glitchy distortion that comes with the quasi-industrial production was pretty impressive. They got in the crowd a decent bit. I generally enjoyed the performance. Leaves me thinking I need to get back to that album. If you haven't heard about them, they're worth a proper shot. And especially for an act that is, as a hip-hop act, stuck performing as one of the earliest in the overall set in the blinding hot sunlight, says a lot.
Watching a feast, catching a heat, snatching a piece, sipping is a piece, taking abs a piece. What? Had to put on a new code. One of four niggas on another two toes. See a boss in a dress top, why they could go. At the end of that, none of these, he can too low. Where is my mind? Where's my mind? Where's my mind?
Okay, next up on my docket is Tkay Maidza. I will say this, as someone who's kind of been lukewarm on a lot of her pop trap R&B, I found her a pretty damn good performer. I found a lot of the backing vocal punch-ins to be a little overdrawn, and not gonna lie, seeing her DJ with the Vultures merch was a choice, but overall she was effective in what she was set out to do. It was generally a really good vibe. I thought she's a strong performer, and while the songs themselves didn't quite stick with me as strongly, I had a good enough time. Again, I think with Tkay Maidza, they're probably waiting for that next big push or the album to put her really over the top for me, but in filling this set, it was pretty impressive. I enjoyed it.
National Geographic, Negroes cooking coke. Anthropologists watch the Negroes sell dope. On huddle corners, doors, they drop notes. Hand to hand like their forefathers before. Hey, it's a good trope. Fascinating stuff. Thumbing 4-finger wearing a cobra clutch. 300 million USD hovering over some mud huts. It's nuts. It's not the heat, it's the dust. Cower when the wind buzz crush. I have halftime down 20. I'm not that good at math, but common sense I got plenty. The watches look tempting. The chains say envy, but PTSD keep me counting, never spending. My accountant is a head full of bad memories and sad endings. It's all payment pending. Now Troy let your virtual worth anything you want on this cursed earth. Probably better off get yourself. See what it's worth.
Okay, so then we have Billy Woods. Full disclosure, I've seen Billy Woods before back in 2022. Hard to complain about seeing more Billy Woods, although the interesting thing is that he was performing and touring with Kenny Segal. Also brought out Sketch 185. I was perfectly happy to hear Sketch 185. Really should have gotten to his album earlier, but again, one more thing, chalk it up to my backlog. It's hard to say much about Billy Woods because, again, he performs such a direct and forceful presentation. He's also in the realm of rappers that do not need to rely on backing tracks, which I was very much appreciative of. And the interesting thing, though, is that I was expecting with Kenny Segal specifically that we get just the predominance of what Kenny Segal has produced for Billy Woods. So a lot of hiding places or maps. And truth be told, we played a much broader selection from out of his catalog. I'm not complaining. I got to hear Remorseless, one of my favorite songs from him, and that was pretty awesome. I was a little surprised we didn't hear more from Maps, but it kind of is what it is. He's a great performer, generally a very interesting vibe for that sort of late afternoon set. I really appreciate it. If you haven't had a chance to see Billy Woods or Arm & Hammer or really anything out of Backwoods Studios, make the time. It's worth it. Now, this is where I have a slight misadventure of my own. See, I brought my pair of combat boots down to the festival because I think combat boots are pretty good to wear at a festival when it comes to terrain, even if they lay down fresh sod or there's the right kinds of sand and grit or just dirt or they put down metal plating. I think combat boots tend to hold up pretty well. But mine, I've had them since 2012 and literally the entire heel just ripped off entirely. By some amazing I managed to get back to the hotel in time in order to basically get it swapped out so I'd be able to put on a pair of runners and be able to return to the festival. But it did kind of short circuit some of my plans when it came to seeing acts on the Friday. Next, we have 100 Gecs. Oh, 100 Gecs are interesting. Not gonna lie, I think they are pretty much built for that late afternoon, early evening festival set. They are a big enough name, especially off those first two projects. I will say they probably sparked one of the most intense mosh experiences that you would expect, as they're probably the act that I would say caters to the youngest audience or the most online audience that would show up at Pitchfork. The interesting thing though is that they kind of feel out of place when it comes to a lot of Pitchfork's billing. Kind of had me wondering how much they would go off. And I'll be full disclosure here, I liked their set. They played the majority of their catalog, given they only really have a couple of albums and not much more around that. But the backing tracks were very prominent. There was a lot of punch-ins. It was tough to tell how much actual vocal work either of them were doing. It was impressive. It's fun stuff to hear, but at the same time, would I go see them again with that sort of environment, with that sort of presentation? I just wasn't as impressed as I wanted to be. They were good, they were fun, just wasn't enough. I feel like I was expecting a little bit more, and maybe it was just the time of the set or the fact they were facing right into the setting sun. It just didn't fully click for me.
I've been told from both sides I try to see the other side by people who have never tried to see the other side. You wanna go away, you wanna go away. That's never gonna stop. No matter. I like you better when you were on my mind. I like you better when you were on my mind. I like you better when you were on my mind. I like you better when you were on my mind.
All right, Jeff Rosenstock. Here is the interesting thing about Jeff Rosenstock, in that he is a punk lifer, and from his stage, he played like a punk lifer. He got up, he managed to smash through a lot of his stuff. His band is really, really tight. He's a really potent singer. But here's where we get to something interesting about the billing that comes with Pitchfork, specifically tied to their concession and sponsorships. This year, Pitchfork had been sponsored by Nespresso, the ones who make like Nespresso machines that's predominantly backed by Nestle. Nestle is the sort of mega corporation that does heinously evil shit surrounding the water supply and exploitation thereof all over the world. And make no mistake, Jeff Rosenstock was going to shout that out and make a point of it during his set. He's got songs ripping into festival culture before. I'm not remotely surprised that he did it. It's also the sort of thing that probably does not get him invited back. But at the same time, if you're looking to pitch to an audience that can afford going to Pitchfork and an appropriate brand to cover all the acts that would get sponsored without making the ticket prices uninhibited, yeah, I'm not surprised that Nestle Nespresso was a sponsor. It's one of those weird and awkward things that comes with a festival that claims to be anti-establishment or in the establishment but slightly adjacent to it, that wants to make commentary on it, having to confront the mechanical realities of running these sorts of things. Just kind of a mess all around, even if I think the show itself was really good. Jeff Rosenstock is good at what he does. Can't complain.
There's a fire, call a fireman. If you're in pain, babe, then call a doctor. Don't be afraid to say I need you, darling. I will understand, help them understand. Help us understand the love of rock and roll.
So here's where I might bait a little bit of controversy, and this is where we have the first headliner of Pitchfork on the Friday. Black Pumas. Full disclosure, I have heard Black Pumas. I was actually considering a review of them, I want to say way back in 2019, and from what I have heard of their sound, they are fine. They're very enjoyable, very agreeable in that sort of R&B and soul and funk music. Their frontman is impressive. He can really sing. I think they're generally a solid presentation. They fit well into a lot of Spotify throwback playlists. And I am a little bewildered that they were booked as a headliner for Pitchfork. Now, don't get me wrong, they were really good seeing them. I don't really think their songs are super strong, which is one reason I've never really been fully on board with them. I haven't heard that moment that's really crystallized them for me. But at the same time, as a headliner, they're not one of the biggest names in indie music right now. They're Grammy nominated. And as a headliner that doesn't really have that same level of critical clout or cachet, it's a little bewildering that they were given such a stage, to the point where there are critics who highlighted just how many people cleared out of the Black Pumas set. As a Friday headliner, I'm comparing it to when I went 2 years ago and we have the National, who also had that level of acclaim, but they had a catalog so large that they could really draw upon to fuel that entire show. Black Pumas felt like an odd choice. Would not have booked them as a headliner, and maybe they're just not for me. I left pretty early into the set. That's all.
You picked me in a pawn shop. I was used, crooked as new, shiny as a tattoo, but permanent as party balloons.
Okay, now on to Saturday, and we're going to start off with Rae Jepsen. Full disclosure, I've reviewed Rae Jepsen's debut album before. I think it's really good. I wouldn't call it great. I thought there was a shagginess to the writing and presentation that kind of had to grow on me, and it mostly has. It just, maybe there's an additional step to really go over the top for me. But I will say she is extremely good live. The comparison that me and my friends made was Tracy Chapman in her most stripped down form, and I think that's apt, but I also think Rae Jepsen carries herself with a little bit more of a willowy folk presence, a little less reliant on groove, and yet the fact that she could still command even the smaller audience in an early afternoon set was pretty impressive. I do appreciate that Pitchfork will have very stripped down performers in that sort of time slot and let them really flex, and she sounded really, really good. I was generally impressed. I'm going to be checking out that next Rae Jepsen album. I did not love her debut, but I did like it enough, and this presentation did enough that I want to see more. Then we have Wednesday, another very highly critically acclaimed act that I'm a little more lukewarm on than a lot of people. But hey, they played Chosen to Deserve. I like that song a lot. You know what? For this sort of meat and potatoes indie rock that occasionally dabbles near country, although not really that much, speaking as the guy who covers a lot of country, I thought, again, Wednesday was fine. They were really fun. They were solid. They effectively performed well. They had good interplay with the audience. It wasn't something that wowed me per se, but again, I was not exactly going to complain by seeing Wednesday. I get why the appeal is there. They're just kind of not for me in the same lane. That's fine. They put on a good show. Not going to complain.
Running like me, I'm on a kind of master, what's a masterpiece? When you rock, just impersonations of me. Writers MCMP with the beat. In the middle of a little the plan. 13 for band, for face of band, made up a mini. Get the murders to dust, let mine us train to hit it. And a straight left, wait, and just fade away.
Okay, so here we enter my favorite arguable run of the entire festival, and we're starting off with De La Soul. Now, I was a little concerned with De La Soul. They haven't really been super active in terms of releasing new music in nearly a decade, and while they got a lot of their catalog back, I was curious how well that would bounce off of a slightly older festival audience that comes with Pitchfork, but maybe not so old that they would have lived with and appreciated De La's music at the time. Boy, I was wrong in that regards. They put on one hell of a show. I do appreciate that how much chemistry the members of De La Soul have in terms of the interplay, in terms of not having to rely on backing vocals, the sheer amount of energy, and then they brought out Talib Kweli. Now, apparently this is not supposed to be that surprising. Talib Kweli has been on tour to some extent with them, and they came up within the same circles tied to native tongues. I'm not surprised that the interplay would be there, but it felt so naturalistic. It felt so organic. The grooves were infectious. And then they brought out Pharaoh Monch too. Holy shit, I marked the hell out. This was more than I could have possibly expected or dreamed of. The combination of them playing through those 90s hits, playing them so effectively, I utterly adored this set. No complaints, probably my favorite set of the entire festival. And considering that they are an older hip-hop group and went over so well, I could not be happier. And I'm real looking forward to that next Pharoah Monch album. Apparently it's coming this year. I'm excited.
There's something good that's even better than it seems. Come on. Lights on the purest that is different. I work hard. I do my thing. Just till it's time. I need a friend. This is my love. Making me
Next up we have Jessie Ware. Now, as all of you know, I adored Jessie Ware's album from 2023. It was one of my favorites of this year, and turns out when she goes to perform it live, she sounds phenomenal, because when you have a classically trained singer who has been toiling on some smaller stages for a long time, but now finally has the opportunity to go full disco queen with a very tight band behind her and good singers and good dancers around her, she is really going to show out another major highlight. The songs were great. She has such a great live performance. She owns that disco queen diva performativity. I think she's really taking the opportunity to cut loose and be looser as a performer, and playing on a bigger stage. She's built for it. I was really pleased with this. Overall, setlist was tight. No complaints at all. Come on, it's Rae Jepsen. I saw her at Osheaga last year. I'm kind of going to echo a lot of things I otherwise already said. It's Rae Jepsen. I'm a little bit more familiar. I've seen her multiple times in Canada. She and her band are so tight and in sync with each other. She is built for the sort of mid to late card pop diva presentation, and Rae Jepsen knocked it out of the park once again. To the surprise of nobody, she was phenomenal. Absolutely loved it.
Conversation with myself.
I did kind of cut out of Carly Rae's set a little early. I have seen her before. I wanted to go see Unwound, mostly because I had a friend of mine that if I did not see Unwound, they would place a curse on me and my entire family. Now, the funny thing with Unwound is I'm not super familiar with their catalog. It's the sort of thing and the sort of sound I've wanted to get into more, as they are a band that's widely cited as being influential in their scene and time. Yeah, I generally enjoyed it. I wouldn't say I was precisely blown away. I didn't have a chance to get as close as I perhaps may have wanted to. And again, I'm not as familiar with the music, but the vibes were certainly there. It was generally enjoyable. It was the sort of thing where, again, if I was more familiar with the catalog, it might have clicked a little more strongly. But as it was, again, cannot complain. Finish off Saturday with, again, me being a little contentious, because who was headlining on Saturday was Jamie XX, and he, as a producer, was one of the big reasons I wanted to come to the festival. There's a new Jamie XX album coming. In Color is one of the best electronica albums of the 2010s. I was really, really excited to see him. And then he spent his festival specifically playing a lot of music that was not his own, in a tribute to Chicago electronic and house music. I don't think this is a bad thing. Now again, the Roots did something somewhat similar when I saw them in 2022, and when they were headlining, they're there to set up the dance party and the vibe. But I think with Jamie XX, it felt like a bit of a misstep. Not that the music is bad, because it wasn't, and Jamie XX is a really good DJ, and the flow was immaculate. But at the same time, if you have a new album that's coming, that has been hotly anticipated for nearly a decade, and you have a classic in your catalog that a lot of people would want to hear, and you don't really play it, it feels like a complete misstep, I gotta be honest. I had fun with it, but I was expecting something different. I learned to like with what we got, but again, could have had a little more. That's all.
Delicious, and everything gushing bright and crimson. Oh, delicious, everything gushing bright and crimson. Down the mirrored halls wearing cuffs with insignias gleaming. With the body down, higher than Alastina. With the body down, higher than Alastina.
Okay, and we're finishing things off on Sunday. And I'll freely admit we got to Sunday a little bit later than I would prefer, just a little bit of a late night on Saturday. And getting into Sunday, the first act that I was really excited to see was Model Actriz. Again, one of my favorite albums of last year, and whoo boy, they were impressive live. I think part of this was the level of raw, noisy intensity and tightness that they had. It was the sort of thing where their frontman would stalk into the audience and vamp to a frankly irresponsible degree, and was able to pull it off incredibly effectively. It was honestly the sort of show that I'm a little surprised where they got the sort of stage billing that they did. They were able to sell and control the stage really effectively, and got a crowd to really get into their sound at like 3:30 in the afternoon. That's impressive as all hell. They played everything I wanted to hear, especially coming off of a single album. Although I will say that their guitarist looked like he was going to shred and destroy all of his equipment, and they did run into technical issues and glitches midway through, because when you're playing music that is that explosive and abrasive, you are going to test the abilities and power of your equipment, and they certainly did. Apparently there were issues on the red stage for the remainder of the festival trying to get everything back together. I mean, I guess that happens. It was just kind of frustrating. Breather here. The next one I really wanted to see was Mannequin Pussy, another act in which I like but don't fully love in to some extent. I, again, have appreciated a lot of their music, and welcome to the next act where there were apparently technical issues. Now, relatively modest ones, all things considered. Apparently, a couple mics blew out, but that wasn't entirely surprising. The front woman was often very quiet, singing with high gain whisper singing, and then immediately defaulting to screaming. So that contrast puts a lot of audio equipment through the ringer, and that apparently led to issues with them. The music is solid. I wish I would love one of their albums front to back the entire way through, but they played a lot of what I wanted to hear. I can't say I was altogether surprised, but I had a good time with it. Good stuff. Didn't really have much time to catch Grandmaster Flash. Apparently he was along at the same time as Mannequin Pussy. I'm just going to bring him up briefly now. He basically played a DJ set. A party DJ set from the 70s and 80s. That struck me as a little odd with Pitchfork and some of their billing, which I'm going to bring up now. I'm not sure they fully tapped into the zeitgeist that would show up and flesh out a full festival. Because given the amount of independent names that they want to platform, and given the size and stages of a mid-set, mid-card festival, it's a little tough to get the big names at the right time, especially given all the upheaval surrounding Pitchfork in general this year. So, Grandmaster Flash, okay, fine. I know he DJs a good set. But at the same time, it's a little odd of a choice to go for, especially given everything else that's booked alongside him. Anyway, I only caught him for a few brief moments right before Muna, and Muna was great. Honestly, again, they made my list of my favorite albums in 2022. There's not a lot to say about it. The chemistry is immaculate. They've got really good stage banter. Got the first inclinations that their front woman was launching a solo career. Really hope that does not break up the band, although that was some stage banter that was interestingly timed. The other thing I will say is that, again, they played effectively everything that I wanted to. I was kind of hoping that if they did Silk Chiffon, which they ended out their set with, that they might have brought out Phoebe Bridgers, but I also know if they had got Phoebe, she would have headlined the festival, so we go with what we get. And overall, they are a phenomenal pop rock group in that vein. I think they've got a really long, really dedicated foundation for them. It's going to be very interesting to see where they go from here.
Take a knee. Holy Ghost, come get me now. I wanna hear those church bells sound.
Okay, so this was an act that I kind of caught in passing. I was going to go sit down a little bit, have some dinner before the final acts of the festival, and Les Savy Fav, they're okay. In terms of the jangling, somewhat noisy, but approachable, like post-punk and dance punk they were making, they were fine. I wouldn't say I was wowed or anything, but I think a larger factor comes with the presentation and knowledge of the material I just didn't really have. I'm not super familiar with them, but I enjoyed what I heard from a distance. They performed well, I would say that. I think some of the interplay was good, but I wouldn't really say I was drawn back to them. Maybe I might give them another shot. said this before in talking about Brittany Howard when I reviewed her album earlier this year, and it's kind of the larger frustration I have with her, and to some extent Alabama Shakes as well. I like and respect her power and presentation and technical skills as a musician. I think her band is really, really talented. I think she's experimenting in interesting ways. But the songs often aren't fully there for me. I'm not as gripped as I want to be, and that kind of translated to her live show as well. Not that it was bad. I think she puts on one hell of a performance, and she can really jam and sing at the same time. That is just impressive to see, although I do have questions about that set list, including that full Louis Farrakhan interlude. Even if we are in Chicago, it was certainly a choice. But at the same time, I'm not going to complain too much. She is, again, very technically skilled. She had a lot of the crowd into it. The choice to have her as billing right before one of the headliners is one that I'm not sure built up the momentum for the final sets of the show that I think they were intending. I think she's really good. I think Brittany Howard puts on a solid show. I think some of it is the distance that's just me at this point, but I don't know. I wanted to be more impressed than I am. It kind of just happens. It was good, just maybe not fully my thing. But speaking of questionable booking, Alanis Morrissette. So, full disclosure, I think Alanis Morrissette is often tremendously underrated, even beyond Jagged Little Pill. Her late 90s material is really good. I like her dance pop stuff. Her 2020 album was one of my favorites of that year, tremendously underrated. But when I think about an act that's going to headline Pitchfork, even an older act, Alanis would not be one I go to. I draw the contrast with The Roots, who, yeah, they had mainstream presence and crossover, but there was always that underground critical cachet that, quite frankly, Alanis Morissette's never really had. Now, for better or for worse, I often think that she was treated unfairly, especially earlier in her career, and I know there were a lot of acts, even who, throughout the course of Pitchfork, who were really excited to see her. That was promising, and I can't deny that, given I had some low expectations for her, apparently there's been rumors that she's not great live, I'd say she sounded fine as a singer. She had a lot of presence and performing skill, and her band was really tight as well. So overall, I was satisfied with the presentation and performance, but when I started hearing some of the deep cuts, and especially when I started seeing the graphics packages that I could argue were borrowed from U2, that had a very 90s approach and presentation to their politics that didn't feel as direct or pointed in comparison with what a lot of the other Pitchfork acts were saying during their sets, it kind of felt, well, a little corporate, a little crowd-pleasing, and to some extent that was true about some elements in Pitchfork as a whole. They want to be a festival that caters to left-of-center, more alternative stuff that's going to go off the beaten path, platform a lot of local restaurants, local breweries, local arts and crafts and record stores, being able to put platform artists that are going to be going in weird, promising new directions. The fact that your headliner is Alanis Morissette, who is most well known for her pop crossovers in the mid-90s, again, she's a name that's gonna draw in the tickets, but I'm not sure she's drawing the audience that would really galvanize Pitchfork in the same way. I compare the headliners here, where you have Black Pumas, Jamie XX, and Alanis, compared to the national Mitski, and The Roots. There's a difference there, and it reflects something about the branding of Pitchfork that kind of feels a little at a crossroads. Don't really blame the people who are running it or the people who are getting the billings what they have. Festivals, who can tour right now, who fits within specific time windows, even considering Pitchfork's brand presence in the market, especially given, well, all the upheaval earlier this year, could not have made putting on an even competent festival remotely easy. Putting on any festival is a small miracle in and of itself. But I look at this one and it feels like maybe it was kind of misaligned with their original purposes, or that the billing could have been a little better. Now, granted, their independent to mid-card acts are stacked. Those are where I got the majority of my enjoyment of the festival, but their larger headliners, I don't know, something felt a little off there. Or maybe switch them some of the other ones with the opportunity to play on a bigger stage, take more of a chance, and they didn't do that, and that kind of is a little perplexing. But even still, to summarize all this, I had a really good time in Chicago. I always felt safe in Chicago. I also will say, like, Pitchfork was very accommodating. They were able to put on and handle everything that I otherwise needed. The food was good. The weather was incredible. I never felt the grounds got super out of command. The crowd was never as jam-packed, which I appreciate. And I get older, I get a little tired at some points. I liked having the ability to find a place to sit down. The food was good. The beer, again, please get more interesting craft breweries, but that's me complaining on my little niche. I accept that Pitchfork is not going to be able to cater to every little niche. I was very happy that my flight out, like getting back home, was easy enough. I will say Chicago Airport really could improve a lot there. Just the food options, just the options in order to get some degree of comfort. It's an airport that desperately needs an update. O'Hare does. But again, that is absolutely nitpicking. I had a great time at the festival. And if the lineup is great and my friends are still willing and able to come with me, I will absolutely make a point to going back to Pitchfork next year. And hey, as much as I give them all the shit in the world, they can still put on one hell of a festival. And of that, at least, I'm very grateful. But yeah, thanks a lot for watching. If you want to see more, please be sure to like, share, drop comments, subscribe. Again, this is a little bit late, but it happens when I get home on Monday. I gotta put out Billboard Breakdown on Tuesday, and then time to rest, recover, go back to full-time work. It's a lot of stuff on my docket. It happens. Beyond that, though, anything else I might be able to do to improve my presentation, I'm all ears. And if you all want to get albums on my schedule, so I don't reflect on them in this review, and I'm like, hey, maybe I should have covered them months ago, well, the option of that is in my Patreon right over there. Don't feel obligated. It is tough times, I understand, but the option is available, where you also get options to get albums on my schedule, support the channel, or even just argue with me on my Discord. That's a lot of fun, too. But until then, I'm Mark, you're watching Spectrum Pulse, and I'll see you next time.